Good morning, students, and welcome to today's lesson. Today's lesson will be the last in the series of lessons that you have had on the outbreak of the Cold War. And today we are going to examine how the Cold War actually expanded into superpower confrontation in Europe. But before we do that, let us do a very quick recap on what was covered last week. In last week's lesson, we looked at the actions and reactions that Soviet Union and USA played against each other, right? So we have categorized these actions and reactions into political and economic. For political actions and reactions, we looked at Stalin's speech in the Politburo, as well as Kennan's long telegram and Churchill's Iron Curtain speech, which culminated in 1947 with the Truman Doctrine and the containment policy that was implemented by the USA. What exactly is the containment policy? So the containment policy was actually the policy that USA put in place in order to contain or stop the spread of communism. And they actually committed to doing so through various actions, one of which would be the economic plan, the Marshall Plan, to provide financial aid to Western European countries who were struggling with post-war recovery. Now, at the same time, of course, with the containment policy announced in 1947 by Truman, Stalin also stepped out to announce the formation of Comintern, which is a group consisting of the Eastern European countries together with Soviet Union into a political union. Okay, and in 1947, when the Marshall Plan, an economic plan to help Western European countries by giving them financial aid, was introduced, Stalin again reacted to that with the formation of Comintern, okay, a group which again similarly provides financial assistance to the Eastern European countries. Alright, so far? Okay, so this was what we actually covered last week. Now, in today's lesson, we are going to look at the Berlin Blockade, this event that happened in Germany. This event happened in 1948. Okay, so you see somewhat similar. Now, I'm going to explain to you, right, what was going on in post-war Germany at that point in time, right? So if you look at the infographic map that you have here in front of you, you will actually see that the entire Germany has been split into 4 parts, each manned by one of the foreign powers. Okay, so you have the UK, you have France, you have USA, and then you have Soviet Union. So this was what they had agreed. Okay, the powers, the Allied powers, together with Stalin, had agreed to do with post-war Germany. Right, they had agreed to split Germany up equally among the 4 of them. Now, at the same time, I want you to take note of Berlin. Okay, now Berlin is the capital of Germany, and you will see that Berlin happens to fall in which sphere? Okay, it happens to fall very nicely into the Soviet sphere of influence. Correct? Follow so far? And hence, because Berlin being the capital of Germany, okay, and where the central government was actually located, Berlin itself was also divided into 4. So if you look at the map on your right, okay, you will see that here this is Berlin, and again you will see 4 different colors, okay, to signify how Berlin itself was was divided into 4 zones, 4 allied zones. Okay, and how Berlin fell under the Soviet sphere. So what was the whole Berlin blockade about? Okay, before we go into that, okay, we need to understand, okay, the context and what was going on. So the thing is, there was actually inflation that happened in West Germany and East Germany. Okay, why did inflation come about? Okay, simply because the country was trying to recover economically after the war. Okay, they started printing more money, and again, similarly to hyperinflation, to the situation of hyperinflation, right? The value of the German currency actually fell very greatly. So what did the Allied powers, Britain, France, and USA decided to do? They decided to change the currency in West Germany. Okay, so West Germany refers, okay, if you follow my cursor, West Germany, of course, refers to the Western sphere of influence, right? So that of Britain, France, and USA. Okay, the Soviet sphere would be considered East Germany, right? So even within Germany itself, you see the divide between the two blocks, okay, like what Churchill had mentioned in the Iron Curtain speech. So what the Allied powers decided to do for West Germany to overcome the problem of inflation, they changed the currency to their own. Okay, and this actually resulted to strong economic recovery. Now Stalin, when he saw what was going on in West Germany, he again was not to be outdone. So he also changed the currency in East Germany to their own, to the Soviets' own currency. Okay, so what do you see actually happening? Now you actually see how one country, Germany, is split not just politically into two, but economically into two as well. So it is as if that there are two Germanys running at the same time. Okay, you have West Germany and you have East Germany. Now that situation is very similar to the situation happening in Korea today, right? How you have two Koreas within one big country, Korea. Okay, so you have the East and the West. Now, Stalin, one day, okay, he just decided, okay, he made a decision to actually conduct something known as the Berlin Blockade. So what exactly is the Berlin Blockade? So if you look at the map again, you see how Berlin, okay, had the four different occupation zones, right, by the four different countries. So within Berlin, there was also East Berlin and West Berlin. Okay, what Stalin decided to do is, Stalin decided to actually cut off all land and waterways from Western Germany into West Berlin. Okay, he cut off the communication, food, and supplies, right? So if you think about it, okay, because you have West Berlin here, what was going on was that, okay, West Germany, okay, was actually sending food, sending supplies, okay, communicating, okay, and transporting, okay, telecommuting, right, into West Berlin. However, because Stalin had control of this area, he actually blocked off all access. So he did not allow the West Germany or West German, okay, Germans to actually be sending supplies to West Berlin. Now, what was his intention? Okay, his intention was he actually wanted to control the entire Berlin zone. He wanted to starve the Germans in West Berlin into submission and force the Western powers to abandon their plans to unify all Western zones together. Okay, so Stalin wanted the whole of Berlin, and he decided that the easiest way to do so was actually to cut off access to West Berlin from West Germany. Okay, now how did the West react? How did the Western powers react? Okay, did they actually just sit back and allow Stalin to take control of the entire Berlin? Obviously not. Okay, and so the West actually responded by something known as the Berlin Airlift. Okay, since all the land and waterways, okay, were actually closed, the Western powers decided, okay, I can't go by land, I shall go by air instead. So for 11 months, they actually flew supplies into West Berlin, right? So they would actually put all the supplies onto their planes. The planes will fly across West Berlin, okay, and at the right spot, okay, would release the items and nicely into West Berlin. Okay, so they flew supplies such as food, coal, and materials. Now Stalin, he saw these planes coming in, okay, but of course he did not dare to shoot down any of these planes for fear of starting another war. Okay, so in total, right, for 11 months, okay, almost close to a year, right, about 2.3 million tons of supplies were actually flown into Berlin. Okay. All right, so this is actually the pictorial representation. All right, so you see Berlin here, and you see how Western Germany, the Western powers, actually flew their supplies, okay, to and fro, right, to actually keep West Berlin supplied with food and necessities. What was the result of the Berlin Blockade? Okay, so if you think about it, who was the victor? Who was the loser? Obviously, the victor here would be the West, correct? Right? They were shown to be a credible, USA in particularly, okay, shown to be a credible ally, right? They were presented to the world as a country where they would not give in to Stalin. They will not give in to his demands, right? Simply because he wanted something, right? They would not negotiate. They would find a way around it, right? They were also seen to be technologically superior because they were able to come up with a solution to the Berlin Blockade. On the other hand, Soviet Union was perceived as the loser in this Berlin Blockade, right? They lost their prestige and they were humiliated, right? They were seen as, oh, you wanted to do something but you failed, okay? And not just that, Soviet Union was perceived to be actually very aggressive. Now, moving on to the graph, okay, to what we have here on the right, okay, I want to actually bring up this point about how the West, okay, actually came up with a military policy known as NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So NATO is actually a military policy, and in this military policy, the West, okay, or the Western sphere of influence, they actually committed, right, to defend democratic countries from communism. In fact, USA committed to stationing US troops in Europe to protect weak Western Europe, right, from the aggressive Soviet Union. So NATO was actually formed in response to the Berlin Blockade. Okay, so take note that if not for the Berlin Blockade, right, NATO could possibly not have been formed. And when Soviet Union actually saw that NATO was actually created, okay, they actually ended the blockade a month later. Right? Okay, so to actually sum up what NATO is all about, right? Okay, it's actually about how member states agree to come to each other's defense if they were attacked by external party. So in this case, you will see that how West Berlin was actually attacked in a sense by the Soviets, and how you have the Western powers coming in to actually come to West Berlin's defense. Now, of course, right, when the West actually set up NATO, a military pact, Soviet Union would not sit back to do nothing, right? Remember the whole action and reaction? Okay, so similarly, right, the reaction from Soviet Union, just like NATO, they also came out with a military policy known as the Warsaw Pact. Okay, the Warsaw Pact was created in 1955, and this is where Soviet Union actually occupied most of Eastern Europe with actual Red Army troops. Okay, and what did they actually pledge to do? Okay, look at this point here. Okay, the Warsaw Pact actually pledged to defend any other member country that might be attacked by an external party, right? So it's actually basically putting in concrete, right, what NATO is to the West. So the Warsaw Pact is what NATO is to the West. Okay, the Warsaw Pact in the East is what NATO is to the West, right? And the Warsaw Pact also complements Comiform and Comecon, just like how NATO complements the containment policy as well as the Marshall Plan. Alright, okay, so that actually brings me to the end of today's very short content lesson. Okay, to perhaps summarize what we have actually studied in this entire chapter on the outbreak of the Cold War, we looked at, right, the ideological conflict that already existed between communism and democratic capitalism. We looked at the mistrust that was formed between the two superpowers. We looked at the reactionary behavior in terms of political, economic, and military. Okay, and how by 1955, or rather as early as 1947, okay, how USSR and USA actually divided most of the world into two camps. Doing okay so far? Right? So this actually brings us to the end of the outbreak of the Cold War. Okay, we have actually looked at why it started. We looked at the actions of both superpowers, and we actually see it expanding. So the Berlin Blockade was an extension of the Cold War into Europe, right? In the last content chapter that you will study, you will see how this division of the two spheres of influence was actually brought to Asia as well when we look at the Korean War. Okay, so remember, if you have any questions, okay, please text me, drop me a text, and then I will try my best to answer them. Okay, if not, that is all for today's lesson. I hope that you were actually able to follow it, and I will see you very soon. Thank you, class.